Her plan was perfect until I found the key that uncovered her secret life and crimes. But let me start the story from the beginning. It was meant to be just an ordinary night at home. Quiet, uneventful. I was alone, lost in thought, the TV murmuring something in the background. I just eased myself onto the sofa, beer in hand, when my phone vibrated. Her name lit up the screen. My wife. I almost let it go unanswered. Recently, talking had become strained, forced even. Conversations were brief, cold. No longer the comforting warmth we'd shared before. But this call at this hour? That was odd. I slid my thumb across the screen. Hey! I tried to sound relaxed. Silence. Too much silence. The kind that warns you bad news is coming. Then she spoke, her voice drained of any feeling. I just wanted you to hear it from me first. I'm filing for divorce. My grip tightened on the phone. What? I've already hired an attorney. From now on, you need to go through him. His name is... Wait, hold on. Divorce? Where's this coming from, Hannah? Another heavy silence. I'm not doing this, she finally replied, sharper now. I don't want to fight. I've made my choice. If you want to discuss anything, talk to my lawyer. Then the line went dead. I stared numbly at the screen, her name still glowing there like a cruel joke. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't impulsive, it was calculated. Hannah never did anything without careful thought. That realization sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't just leaving me, she was shutting me out completely. No chance to talk, no answers, just a lawyer's name and a door slammed in my face. Something felt deeply wrong. The next morning, I did exactly what she said. I called her lawyer. The voice that answered was polished, smooth. Yes, Mr. Sullivan, I represent your wife. We can arrange a meeting to discuss the details. He sounded clinical, detached. Fine, I said. I'll come by this afternoon. Just like that, my entire world became a legal formality, cold and impersonal. When I got to the lawyer's office, I noticed the wealth immediately. The lavish art, plush leather seats, and a glass conference room designed to intimidate. Hannah hadn't picked just anyone. She brought out the heavy hitters. The receptionist guided me into an office, and as soon as I walked in, the lawyer stood. He was slick, mid-50s, silver hair impeccably combed, a man who thrived on authority. Mr. Sullivan, he greeted, extending a steady hand. Please sit down. I sat, and he took his place behind the desk, observing me quietly. Then without thinking, I said something that changed everything. I'm Hannah's husband. The lawyer's expression faltered. He stiffened visibly, fingers nervously reaching for a folder. He tried to mask it, but something was off. Seriously off. Anxiety twisted inside me. His reaction wasn't normal. He knew something, and he was afraid. His hand trembled slightly as he slid the folder toward him. On the surface, he still looked composed, yet beneath it was a subtle tension, an agitation that couldn't be concealed. Strange for a man accustomed to contentious divorces to seem so unsettled. That alone confirmed my suspicions. I leaned closer, keeping my voice steady but firm. Is there something wrong here, counselor? He swallowed hard, the muscles in his throat working visibly. He forced a weak smile. Mr. Sullivan, forgive me. I just didn't anticipate you'd come so quickly. He was lying. Someone had been expected. Just not me. He placed the folder carefully on the desk, but his hands betrayed him, shaking slightly. He quickly clasped them together, attempting to hide it, but I'd already noticed. You're Hannah's lawyer, I said slowly, holding his gaze. But you're acting like you've just seen a ghost. He forced a laugh, shaking his head dismissively. No, nothing like that. Just a busy morning, you understand. All right, let's dive right in, he said, flipping open the folder and pulling out a single sheet of paper. He cleared his throat, seeming to regain some control. Your wife filed for an uncontested divorce. He placed the document in front of me, pointing directly to the bottom line with a perfectly groomed finger. She's willing to part ways cleanly. No arguments over money, no long, exhausting court battles. Just sign right here and everything wraps up nice and quick. Quick, easy, painless. I picked up the paper but kept my eyes locked on him instead of reading. Don't you want to review the details first? I asked evenly. There's nothing complicated here, he replied. Everything's straightforward. Really? He nodded again, but I caught it, the slight flicker of discomfort. This wasn't just a divorce. Hannah was orchestrating something. The abrupt phone call, her insistence that we communicate only through her lawyer, even the overly generous settlement terms. It all felt staged. She wasn't looking for a legal battle. She wanted me gone fast. And this lawyer? He knew exactly why. Finally glancing down at the paperwork, I skimmed through the familiar legal terms. Everything appeared fair, assets evenly divided, no demands for spousal support, no disputes over property. But one detail jumped out immediately: the date. "This was filed 3 weeks ago," I said slowly, narrowing my eyes at the lawyer. He hesitated, then admitted, "Yes, 3 weeks ago." "So when exactly was my wife planning to let me know?" My voice hardened. She acted like this was some last-minute decision. His composure cracked slightly, a subtle twitch, barely noticeable, but it told me everything. Hannah was hiding something significant, something urgent enough that she needed the divorce settled immediately. Leaning back casually, I tapped the paper against my hand. "Mr. Bennett," I said, noting the nameplate on his desk for the first time. "Do you usually get this nervous around your clients, or is it something about me in particular that's bothering you?" He tensed visibly, jaw muscles tightening. "Mr. Sullivan, I assure you this is a completely routine matter." "Routine, huh?" I calmly slid the document back across the desk toward him. "I'll need some time before I sign anything." He exhaled sharply, clearly relieved yet still uncomfortable. He nodded curtly, closing the folder and pulling it toward himself. "Of course," he said, though he didn't sound happy about it. "Take all the time you need." Standing, I buttoned my jacket slowly, keeping my eyes locked on his. "You strike me as a smart guy, Mr. Bennett, and smart guys don't shake unless something really serious is troubling them." He stayed quiet, but the brief flash of fear in his eyes was unmistakable. I smiled faintly. "Have a good day." Outside, fresh air hit me, but my heart was still pounding heavily. 3 weeks. Hannah had spent nearly a month secretly planning, arranging everything, keeping me entirely in the dark. This wasn't how someone behaved if they'd just fallen out of love. This was how someone behaved when they had something to hide. I took out my phone and dialed. "Hey, Caleb," I said as my best friend answered. "I need your help." Caleb didn't immediately question it. That's how I knew he sensed something serious. "What's going on?" "Hannah's up to something," I explained, pacing near the firm's entrance. "She filed divorce papers 3 weeks ago, but only told me yesterday. And when I met her lawyer, he was practically shaking." Caleb whistled softly. "That's not just cold, it's calculated." "Exactly." "You think she's cheating?" Caleb asked carefully. "I thought about that, but it doesn't feel right. If she was just having an affair, why rush like this? Usually cheaters drag things out until they're caught. Hannah's acting like she needs me gone immediately." Caleb paused thoughtfully. "What do you need me to do?" I checked my watch. "Hannah's still at work. Check her car, look for receipts, spare keys, notes, anything that might clue us in." Caleb chuckled lightly. "Breaking into your wife's car? You sure you want to go that far?" "I don't have a choice," I responded firmly. "Something's wrong, Caleb. I have to know what it is." "All right," he agreed immediately. "Send me her location. I'll handle it." I ended the call and took a deep breath. Now it was my turn to act, digging into Hannah's secrets. While Caleb handled the car search, I drove straight to Hannah's office downtown, a corporate tower where she worked as a financial advisor. I had no intention of confronting her directly. Not yet, anyway. Instead, I settled into a cafe across the street, ordering a coffee I barely tasted. I pulled out my phone and began sifting through our recent financial records. Checking bank statements revealed nothing unusual. Standard bills, groceries, predictable expenses, nothing suspicious. Until I opened the credit card statement. There it was, a charge from last week for the Silver Pines Resort. Expensive, luxurious, the type of place you don't stay at alone. But my gut twisted painfully. Could Hannah really be cheating? But if that was true, why rush this divorce through so suddenly? My thoughts scattered when my phone buzzed again. "Caleb, you're going to want to hear this," he said immediately when I answered. "I just finished checking Hannah's car, and buddy, you're not going to believe what I found." 20 minutes later, I parked beside Caleb, who stood leaning against his car, waiting anxiously. "What have you got?" I asked as soon as I stepped out. He grinned darkly. "Something that's going to blow this whole mess wide open." My pulse quickened. "Show me." He reached into his pocket and held up an electronic key fob. "What's this?" "Found it hidden in Hannah's glove compartment," Caleb explained. "Looks like it unlocks a storage unit." I frowned. "Hannah doesn't have a storage unit." "Apparently she does," Caleb replied, raising an eyebrow. My mind raced. The expensive hotel, the sudden divorce, and now this. A secret storage unit? Caleb put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Let's go." 20 minutes later, we arrived at an Iron Gate Storage Solutions surrounded by high fencing topped with razor wire. Privacy seemed to be a high priority here. Caleb looked at me seriously. "You sure you're up for this?" I nodded sharply. I need answers. We stepped through security easily, following the facility's layout until we found Hannah's unit. I held the electronic key fob against the sensor, heard a beep, and watched as the lock disengaged. Taking a deep breath, I pulled up the heavy metal door and froze. Inside were neatly stacked boxes, and when I saw what was in them, my heart nearly stopped. Stacks of key. Way more than Hannah could ever earn legitimate to me. I opened another box, revealing stacks of financial documents, spreadsheets filled with unfamiliar names and unfamiliar signatures. I flipped open a ledger lying near the top, my hands shaking. Jesus, Caleb whispered, looking over my shoulder. The ledger was packed with transaction records, small amounts, large sums, all linked to names and accounts offshore, foreign, hidden. My heart pounded harder. Hannah wasn't just leaving me. She'd been running something shady, something huge. Then my eyes landed on a familiar detail. The lawyer's name appeared multiple times. Transactions listed beside his initials. That's why he was shaking, I whispered. The lawyer isn't just her divorce attorney. He's part of this. Caleb shook his head, incredulous. Your wife isn't just having an affair, buddy. She's involved in some serious financial crimes. No wonder she wants me gone fast. I muttered, feeling a cold weight settle in my chest. Caleb whistled softly. You married one hell of a strategist. I nodded slowly, my mind spinning. We need to figure out exactly what she's into. Caleb eyed me cautiously. You sure about this? You're diving deep here. I don't have a choice, I said firmly. I need the whole truth. Bury you. That thought wouldn't stop running through my head. Hannah had clearly planned this for weeks. This wasn't a random decision. She had prepared every move carefully. What if she wasn't just divorcing me? What if she was framing me for whatever she'd gotten herself into? Standing in front of those boxes filled with issues and incriminating paperwork, it hit me clearly. Hannah thought I'd be too hurt, too distracted to notice what was happening. She expected me to quietly sign the papers and disappear from her life. Well, she had seriously misjudged me. Setting the trap was simple enough. Caleb glanced at me, eyebrows raised, curious about my next move. I'm going to sign the papers, I told him calmly. Caleb's head jerked up. Wait, you're going to sign? I nodded. Exactly. Hannah wants to finalize this divorce in a hurry because she's trying to vanish before her scheme collapses. I'm going to let her think she's won. He frowned, crossing his arms. And after that, I tapped the ledger firmly. Then we flipped the tables. Caleb grinned slowly, understanding. When do we start? I spent the evening preparing everything, quietly setting the trap. The next day I dialed Bennett's number, voice steady and casual. Mr. Bennett, I'm ready to sign those papers. There was a short pause on his end, followed by a relieved breath. Excellent, Mr. Sullivan. We can handle that today if you would like. Today works perfectly. Inside Bennett's plush office, Hannah sat poised, perfectly dressed, and projecting an air of cool confidence. But beneath her composed surface, I sensed impatience. She wanted this done quickly. Bennett slid the divorce documents toward me. Hannah's eyes briefly flicked in my direction as I took the pen and signed without hesitation. She exhaled softly, relaxing slightly. She thought she'd succeeded. She had no idea. As I rose from my seat, I casually pulled a manila envelope from inside my jacket and set it on the table. Hannah's brow furrowed, and Bennett visibly tensed. Oh, one last thing, I said, keeping my voice calm. You might want to see what's in there. Hannah hesitated but eventually reached for it. Bennett had already turned pale. He knew exactly what was inside. Hannah flipped through the contents slowly, her hands trembling. Pages filled with photos of the storage unit, bundles of cash, detailed offshore account transactions, and Bennett's name highlighted clearly. Her head shot up, eyes wide and panicked. Bennett leapt up so abruptly his chair toppled backward. You, Hannah whispered, voice shaking. Her hands flipped through the pages, each document sealing her fate. I leaned forward slightly. You tried to bury me, Hannah, but you forgot something important. I know you better than you think. Now the FBI knows too. As if planned, the office door swung open sharply, and two men in dark suits stepped inside. Hannah Sullivan? One agent asked, holding up his badge. Hannah froze completely. The second agent turned to Bennett. Mr. Bennett, we'd like a word about your involvement in offshore financial activities. Bennett collapsed back into his chair, face ashen. Hannah spun toward me, desperation in her eyes, but it was too late. Hannah Sullivan, the first agent announced sharply, you're under arrest for financial fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Hannah started to scream as the cuffs locked around her wrists. I adjusted my jacket, offered a small, satisfied smile, and walked calmly out the door.